Welcome into Other People's Shoes, the podcast where listeners get to step into the lives of others and see the world through their shoes. Your host, Neil Matthews, is a seasoned interviewer who has a natural talent for empathizing with his guests and drawing out their unique perspectives. Through a combination of storytelling and insightful questioning, Other People's Shoes explores the lives of a diverse range of guests, from everyday people to celebrities and thought leaders. With a warm and welcoming style, Neil creates a safe and supportive space for his guests to share their stories, while also challenging listeners to broaden their perspective and think more deeply about the world around them. So tune in to Other People's Shoes with Neil Matthews and get ready to step into other people's shoes.
Hey, come take a walk with me, not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining us today. I don't know about anybody else. There are probably, I would say, about 3 people on the average rotation, maybe 4. Let's make it 4. Nice and even number there. That kind of get brought up or referenced or somehow talked about on a somewhat regular basis on this show. So let's name them, right? Let's do some name dropping. You usually hear about my wife, Elizabeth. So there she is, the queen. She's been on past episode. My daughter Adia, yet to make an appearance, but maybe soon. Who knows? Hold our breath, maybe. And then this other person named Sean McCoy out in Texas. Now, some of you who have listened to the show long enough, you're like, does this person exist? Is he real? Or is he just a figment of your imagination, Neil? Well, I will assure you of this, and it kind of still bugs me even to this moment as I kind of walk back through it with you. My brother-in-law, Rory, who was a big fan and is a big fan of the show, early on sponsored the show with his plumbing company, actually has met Sean in the physical sense, in person, not virtually. And even my best friend, now this is really confusing, my other best friend, Sean, I always call him Maverick because as kids, you know, we love Top Gun. And so Mav and Rory have actually met Sean in person. And I'm going to say it, I'm still pissed about it. And I'm mad about it. But help me welcome in my fellow pickleball player, my podcast friend, my amateur theologian. I don't know. There's so many levels that I could introduce you at, but we'll just stick with that. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, my friend, and friend is good enough. As always, man, it's great to be on the show. Love what you do.
Well, you know, I just feel like this is the farewell tour. No, I hope not. But no. I always think, okay, if this is the farewell tour, if there was such a thing, I have to have you come back on because so much has changed since not only in your life, but in my life. You're into these things now, quite literally blown away by. And I was like, okay, we got to record this because I just think there's no logic behind this. And so I can't wait to get into this conversation.
I appreciate it. And yeah, things have changed. You introduced us as pickleball players, which last time I don't think, I know I'd never heard of it until about 6 months ago. And now it's all I do.
002. Are you ready?
002. Always. Favorite numbers right now.
I played about 3 hours the other day. You even played today. And so it's nonstop excitement.
Well, I've been waiting for this episode in particular because the format and what it's about, and you asked me what shoe I was going to wear. I'm ready. I'm ready for it. And it's based on my obsession with pickleball. Yeah.
I can't wait. So let's get into it then. Great segue there, Sean. That's why I love you. What size shoes are you wearing these days?
Still wear 10.5 very comfortably, although it's wide. I got wide feet. My friends joked, and this plays into the shoe type. My friends joked to me in the Navy. They said that my feet weren't flat. They were tired because I have like no arch at all. It's just like a pancake. And I used to think people that had arches in their feet, something was wrong with them.
I still have an arch and they still hurt from time to time, depending on what shoes I wear. The favorite question of all, at least mine, that one day could lead to sponsorship, let's hope, is this: what style and brand are we wearing these days?
So it's the Xero 360, Xero with an X, Xero. And it's a new type of shoe for me. Like I said, I have flat feet. I've always wanted these big, comfortable shoes. Started playing pickleball back beginning of December. I was wearing running shoes, these really nice running shoes that I have, as you know, when you have some good pair of Sauconys and some other things like that. And they were ripping the arch because, as you know, when you have a running shoe, you're going to walk forwards and only forwards or run forwards. And so the shoes are designed to do that. You're playing pickleball, all the lateral stresses from all the shuffling and moving around it was ripping my shoes apart. And so I went and bought a pair of some Nike cross trainers that were more like your tennis shoe kind of thing. And they were kind of big and clunky, and they were just good for the moment. And I noticed this group at Instagram at the time, even though I got off, like I said, Xero with an X, Xero, and a guy, super light, one of those kind of shoes you can like roll up into a ball, like into like a little egg roll. And he kept saying about how, how durable they were. And he was the best pickleball shoes you could get and whatnot. And so I waited and waited. I got some 360s and I love them. And it's a completely different feel for me because of the way that the shoes are designed, because they're so, I want to say flat, but it's almost like you're hugging the surface. It's super light. So when you run around the court, you're like me, my wife gives me a hard time because I'll come home, not as scraped up anymore. I got smart. I stopped diving for the ball and I don't have to anymore. She goes, you get that scratch in your leg from pickleball? We're like, what's wrong with you? She's like, I'm never going to play with you because you're so dang competitive. I'm like, I'm really not. I just don't want to be the guy that's not giving all that I have. And yes, I've been waiting to say that, but yes, Xero with an X. You can get them as a sponsor. Tell them I sent you. Great shoe and very durable and light. I love them.
I'm checking them out right now and I'm blown away. I'm not seeing a lot of Carolina blue. There is a close shoe that I've seen. And so they say they're like wearing bare feet shoes.
Yeah.
Almost like a sandal. So that's what one description has it at.
Yeah. And like I said, I've never been a fan of that kind of shoe. So you could actually feel the difference. Like if you're used to the cushiony, supportive running shoes, high top, something like that, this is a totally different feel for me. Not staying wearing anything else right now when I do anything active, especially pickleball.
So no more hocus.
No more hocus. Oh, just day to day, like when I'm walking around, I do. Yeah.
That's fun. I'm going to have to check these out. All right. Well, let's get into this because like I said, when you first told me about this, I thought, well, this is perfect because this is right into the alley of where I'm at right now, of this idea of hiding behind or a veil or a mask that perhaps others have been wearing. Help me with this because in our journeys and as time has progressed, you have decided to go in a academic field. Mm-hmm. And there is a reason behind that. So maybe share about the journey of choosing to go back to academics and then the reason why the work and then of course what you've discovered maybe along the way. So 3-parters there, but you can handle it because you're awesome.
No, and they're all linked, so it's pretty easy. And I definitely appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it because it's one of those things. I hope that it may make it into the title a bit, but I will preface this as well with when I told you that I had taken a heroic dose of psychedelic mushroom psilocybin, which is 5 grams of dried mushrooms or more at one time. Your response was, and I quote, "But I thought you were smarter than that." So I'm going to hold you to that.
Are you kidding me? You're bringing back a reference we had on a private phone call?
Yes. Well, that's what led to this.
You have always struck me again. And that's why I led with the preface with you and Rory and Sean. I've never met you face to face, but we've only had these virtual conversations like we're having right now and over the phone a ton and traded a ton of texts. That just seems like a stupid thing to do. So help me understand that, unpack that again. And I know you were, and I was interrupting.
No, it's good because this helps the audience kind of get a reference. And for me, because you are my friend and because I respect you and stuff, I did not respond as I would have to anyone else in terms of coming back at that kind of, you're implying a level of, like you said, stupidity. Surely you can't be that dumb. And the irony is that the Sean McCoy of 2016, 2017 would have agreed with you and wholeheartedly, like would have been like, you got to be out of your mind. So the impetus to this conversation you and I had was I told you I was going back to school to become a therapist, getting my master's in clinical mental health counseling, which I'm currently doing, and start up my summer school tomorrow, which will include a residency this month. And I told you I was doing that. And you were like, well, hey, why are you doing that? And I said, well, I had gone out with a couple of friends of mine on a guided journey, as they call it, around psychedelics, specifically with magic mushrooms, psilocybe cubensis, cubes as they're called, and got a chance to have my proverbial mind, my perspective really, really challenged and really, really just put into a place that one of the big takeaways from that one experience was I wanted to go back to school and become a therapist and help people in that way. Typically is not, for a lot of people, the segue from one to the other. And so I think it's important to kind of go back to what I said before about, where I was. And I think it's really important for people to understand if they're fans of the shows. I'm sure if they're listening now, they have been. My sister's been on the show. And as you know, battled for many, many, many years, significant drug and alcohol dependency. I thought I was going to lose my sister due to addiction. And I mean, like loser. I did for many years. It's the fact that it has not already killed my mother and my brother, both from alcohol at this point in time, is a miracle. I don't know how either one of them are alive. My brother set a record at this hospital in the northwest side of Houston, is walking into the hospital with the lowest hemoglobin count of a person who was alive and came in ever based on, it was a result of his drinking. And it's just one of those things I've dealt with for all my life for the last 40 plus years and seen it do nothing as far as like addiction and as far as those kinds of things and quote unquote drugs legal or otherwise, just destroy people. It's always been the impression. And I was a kid of the 80s. I was a kid that, I don't get any joy out of breaking the rules. I always felt like the rules were intended to be there to help protect us. They're supposed to be in the way to make sure that we don't do something wrong. Speeding's not there to keep you down. It's not so Sammy Hagar can feel constricted. It's so that we all don't kill ourselves on the highway. It's supposed to be there in that context and govern, in a sense, what we're doing in some of our behavior. Underage, I never really liked underage drinking. Even when I was in the Navy, I had my times, but I was never had a problem with substances, was never one to kind of, and I've always disliked, and I mean like with a passion, this idea of covering up or compensating for something, some sort of feeling by just going on, taking the edge off and let's go have a few beers and everything's going to be better. And as I've told my brother, I was like, you drink if the Texans win and you drink if the Texans lose. You just use it as an excuse either way because you want to drink. And it's like, you should just stop. And was very much in that realm for a very long time, especially around something like alcohol. Struggled with understanding what it was around, especially the addiction sides. Is it a disease? Is it a choice? Is it an emotional dependency? Is it a physical dependency? And I was always the straight and narrow, as my sister told you, kind of like the golden child, even though I didn't want to be. And even amongst my peers, like I made sure people got home. That was always my thing, never leave your wingman in a sense. I always made sure that people got home if they wanted to have a good time. It wasn't my thing to go out and just get blown away on whatever substance I could find in the world. And really the story starts in some ways way back in high school. And when I was a senior and I did this report, this research paper about why drugs are made, the illegal drugs, the illegal narcotics, what made them illegal to begin with, what was the reasoning for it? And I can remember, and for years, this is in the early 90s. So didn't have Google. It was all library based and all the old, the Dewey Decimal System and how you used to do research. And people, I don't understand what all that means, but you had to go find the information yourself. And I remember the main crux of the arguments used to make drugs illegal, cocaine, opiates, and cannabis or marijuana specifically, was around race and a lot of this fear that what those drugs would do based on racial bias and racial expectations. If you go back and read the media publications at the time and the actual legal arguments that were brought to the floor in the Senate and on the House, it was fear and based on race. There was no kind of medical or public health concern at the time, especially early 1900s. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's really effed up. And really not something that's cool. But in my mind, I've been trying to think about this for the last 5 or 6 years, especially, did I not cue in on the fact that was the motivation? And I kept trying to think like, what did I miss? And I remember thinking, well, I just had this negative association that you would not. So surely nobody would be stupid enough to do drugs. Anyway, if race is what got us there, it's kind of an unfortunate avenue, but the end result was for protection. So I guess on some level, I don't remember ever consciously thinking that's the best thing I can come up with at this time. And so I just kept thinking, all right, well, there you go. And I just was never that kind of person. And like I said, up until 2016, 2017, I probably would have agreed with you around, even for my own self. Like I never would have thought that I would have said those words to you, what I said a few minutes ago, which is around being completely okay with taking a psychedelic entheogen type drug. And I chose magic mushrooms to go and do that this last summer.
That's the challenge of where my comment came from. I had your sister on, and prior to having your sister on, you and I had a really good connection. Alcoholism has run in your family. Drugs have run in your family. Basically gave us a little snapshot of that. Your dad was heavy into that, your mom too, everybody. And so to me, when I heard you say that as your friend from a distance, Q Bette Midler from a distance, my challenge was, hello, what? It didn't seem in your character. And I know that sounded very attacking at the time as your friend, by the way. Now I hear that in my own words coming back. It comes from a place of not educated. I will say that. I'll acknowledge that. At the same time, when I started talking about it with, I think even Rory, I mentioned to Rory that we were going to be doing this. He goes, what's he going to talk about? And I said, I don't know. I said, it's going to involve this. And he goes, what? Really? Him? So even Rory was like, okay, I got to dig into this. Talk me through that process of, I don't know if you can maybe walk back through that experience. Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. All right. I'd love 100%. To hear that.
Well, because I think it's important to know it took me 5 years to get to that point from when I kind of started, when I was really starting to unpack this, coincidentally around podcast. My very first podcast episode for Come to the Table, which you were on and how we connected to begin with. My friend Jim Sanders was on there to talk about race. And he challenged me to read this book called The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. And it was around the argument that the war on drugs, specifically starting in 1970, 1971 by former President Nixon, was really a indirect way of continuing the caste system that had existed from slavery, Jim Crow, and then this was the new one. And so I read this book. If you read a book and love everything about it and it's entertaining or it just kind of echoes what you already think, you are just literally in the echo chamber in some sense. And so have been specifically challenging myself starting back in the 2016, 2017 around what do I actually know, and really trying to push back on that in terms of my own narrative of what I think is right. And this was one of those chances. And it was a book that was one of the most awful books to read in terms of just the subject matter and then the revelation around it, around what was really happening, what's really going on. And I'll give you an idea. The baseline argument is that the war on drugs was basically created to indirectly create this high imprisonment rate and basically keep certain demographics and socioeconomic groups, predominantly based on race, in a certain place socially. I think I may be butchering that a bit, but the end result of these laws and the war on drugs is to do just that. And an example, and I remember Michelle Alexander starts the book out, and she's coming off this bus, and she was an ACLU educated lawyer, African-American woman, like this is her world, if you will, in social justice. She got off this bus stop and she looked at this telephone pole, and there was a piece of paper, stapled to it, and it said, the war on drugs is the new Jim Crow. And she even says in the book, she was like, that's crazy. Like, there's no way. No, it's not. And then after really investigating the laws and the legal system and the way that law enforcement enforces these laws and what they get from it and how they do these kinds of things and where they come from and how they're doing it, it becomes very, very difficult as I read the book and when I got done with it to think anything different. And I'll give you one example without having to get too far into it. 1986, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act passed during the Reagan administration. And in it, there's one part of it that I can't get over. And that is they created these laws in terms of sentencing around cocaine specifically, that the same amount of crack cocaine, the same amount of powdered cocaine, that the actual sentencing would be 100 times more for crack cocaine than powdered cocaine. The judge goes to issue a sentence in terms of after somebody being found guilty. The law itself starts at 100 times. And I just kept thinking, why would that be that way? If you're going to protect me, you're going to be like, the speed limit's 55. It doesn't say it's 55 based on your car. It doesn't say you're 55 based on your race. It doesn't say you're 50. It just says it's 55. Like, here's the line. So to me, if you're trying to protect us from something like this, then it just is what it is. And whether it's crack or powdered or it's all the same, what would be the reason? What would be the logical reason? What would be the argument internally that you're hoping to create and produce by this law with that kind of disparity? And then what that does to everyone involved in it, not just the person who's being convicted, but the entire system, all the things that go with it. And it really started to open my eyes to the systemic process of how we do things and how a culture and how the software, if you will, of a country, of an area, of a region impacts how everything is happening. And so that's one of the big things. So it started to kind of crack my bulletproof glass on how I felt about quote unquote drugs, trying to research more. And along the ways, I learned about cannabis. I started learning more about that as a plant instead of as this demon weed. I started looking back at some of the things that were going on around reefer madness and all the way that was portrayed. And back to your impression, and I think this is important for us to understand, your impression of those drugs that we've been given. What does a crack whore look like? At least, especially for me. What does a drug dealer look like? What does a drug addict look like? What are all these things? It's all these images we've been given over and over and over and over again. Even though for the most part, none of those things actually play out. Miami Vice to whatever. We have been shown over and over and over and over again what it looks like, what to expect on some level. It became very difficult when I started then look at the real science, the real background, the real nature and the use of those kinds of things, as well as what goes into something like a Schedule I drug. Why are certain drugs looked at? Why were they even, what was the argument, going back to that first argument around what put them in that position where people said, hey, we can't do these kinds of things. A Schedule I drug, in terms of that goes, the two basic arguments are that it's addictive and it has no medical benefit to the person using it. Part of the argument is around the safety side, because they do throw that in there, is just that. Like, you could take it, remember the old argument was that you could get hooked on crack cocaine the minute you smoke it and you're just selling your body and you're gone, right? That's what we were told for years. And I'm not here to say that crack cocaine is not addictive. What starts to split hairs with me is going back to alcohol. I mean, alcohol is addictive, emotionally, physically, and alcohol has no nutritional value, has no medical benefit. There's nothing beneficial to the human body that alcohol provides. We've been told this. We've been told a lot of nonsense for a long time. And now if you start to look at certain articles that are coming out and certain doctors are starting to reverse, they're saying, yeah, we used to say that a glass of wine was good for your heart a day. Turns out that's not true. It's ethanol. Your body does not need it, want it, nor has a place for it. If you really, really look at it, there is nothing about any form of alcohol. And yet that is as legal. Not only is it legal, but it is celebrated in our culture. If I told you gotten drunk last night just before the show and had too much to drink, it was out of character, and not to the same degree as me telling you that I went and did a bunch of magic mushrooms. That would not have been the same argument. Socially, the expectation, maybe for me specifically, but in general, our society, if a sports team wins, what do you do when you see Game 7 NBA Finals? What do they do to the locker room, right? They're putting all kinds of plastic up everywhere because they're getting ready to bathe the place in champagne. This isn't a drug in the same vein as these other ones that causes more death. If you look at it statistically, what it does to our society, I don't want to use the word evil, really, really bad, where it's this amazing, wonderful thing that's part of our lives, really, at the end of the day. And yet we are expected in the most looked at, most celebrated, most accepted moment for a wedding, for a graduation, for you're going to toast a relationship. You and I meet for the first time in person. Hey, let's go get a drink would be kind of the narrative that a lot of people would come up with, or how that created a bond with somebody because you went and had a drink with them. But if you were to come in there after the NBA finals or after some other sports finals and it was all smoked up with cannabis or people were doing psychedelics or something like that, it would be appalling. But yet you're bathing people with alcohol all over the place and nobody says anything else about it. And so part of the challenge is unpacking the narrative that we've been given around what is and isn't good. What does good mean? What drugs are? And we never call alcohol or nicotine a drug. It's always that. But when I say don't do drugs, we know exactly what category and what lane it's in. And then you start really looking at cannabis. So cannabis was kind of my gateway drug, if you will. And although I've never been high, just so you know, but researching it, like back to the 5 years, I listened to a guy named Graham Hancock, who's an investigative journalist, and he wrote a book, America Before. I listened to him on a podcast. I was really intrigued by the guy, listened to what he talked about in terms of just anthropological and archaeological history and challenging some of the narratives around modern day science and those disciplines. And then I'm listening to this guy, unbelievably educated, vast array of books, just seemed like a guy who knew what he was talking about. And then he's like, oh yeah, I've done ayahuasca like 76 times. And I'm like, what in the world is that? What is ayahuasca? Started looking up ayahuasca, and it's a vine, it's an entheogen, it's a psychedelic, predominant down in South America and places like that. These trips, if you will, these truly like just mind-bending trips. I started learning more about mescaline and peyote and ketamine and MDMA and LSD and psilocybin. But cannabis was kind of the first one I was like, well, I got to start small. And then I found out CBD starts coming around, right? Everybody's like, CBD. Like, well, how is this legal? And it's not. And you start learning about cannabinoids and you start learning about cannabis. And then I figure out and I learned there's this documentary, which I would challenge you to watch, called The Scientist by Dr. Raphael Mechoulam. And if I told you that the heart, the foundation of the modern scientific understanding around cannabis, including those who discovered the cannabinoids, THC, as well as all the other ones, there's over 110, 120 that come in the plant, that the epicenter for all this knowledge and where it comes from is Israel. That might surprise you, but it is. That has been the place, that has been the epicenter for cannabis research over the last 50, 60 years. And we've known about it. And we've actually sent money over there to them. There's a documentary, you can find it on YouTube. It's free. It's called The Scientist with Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, Moucheeoum, documentary about this guy and his team of scientists who have started to understand this plant and looked at it like they would any other plant, not as this demon weed, not as this terrible thing, not as this, mind-bending, altering gateway into addiction and terrible living in a gutter. But what is it? One of the things they found, and this is where, again, it starts to unpack for me, is your body, all mammals have an endocannabinoid system. Inside your body is a system that part of all 11 of your major systems that is designed solely to accept cannabinoids that are a part of the cannabis plant, all 120 of them. Now, they make the argument in the documentary, they knew that the plant itself wasn't like this dependent thing. Like it wasn't like you had to have the cannabis plant. There's two naturally occurring hormones, if you will, or chemicals in your body. One's called anandamide, comes from the Sanskrit word meaning bliss, or cannabinoids that your body produces. The other one's called AG2. And there's these two receptors that are part of all 11 of your major systems, your endocrine, pulmonary, cardiovascular, all the rest of these things, digestive. And it helps create homeostasis. It's not meant to make you high necessarily. There's one of the cannabinoids, which is THC, which we've all heard of, is the only one that's psychoactive. The rest, and they work together in what they call an entourage effect, and your body uses it ultimately to create a balance. You're a runner, you have that runner's high, but that runner's medium, where everything's hitting on a cycle. An engine, the way it runs on homeostasis, the way it runs evenly. I wanted to do that, and so I was really interested in that, and so I started looking at CBD and all the rest of these things, and this was kind of my gateway, and I remember I got this version of it, and it's CBD as an isolate is just, there's nothing psychoactive about it. To your point, and why I don't get super mad at people that are like, you idiot, what are you doing with psychedelics? This is 5-6 years ago. I'm in my car with this vial. I know what it is. I've done all this research. I've watched these documentaries, listened to podcasts forever. I know in my mind, in my head, logically, that there's nothing wrong with this. And I could not bring it to my lips and use it. Like all this agita and this edge and this weird and this just like, what are you doing? you fool. Like, how are you doing this? And I'm telling you, I can remember where I was sitting in my car. I remember looking at the little thing and I just kept thinking, I feel like I was in some sort of movie, like I'm over in a corner, like getting a bump or whatever, just taking a hit. This is not my world. It just felt dirty and wrong and evil and whatever, like I was going down the wrong path. And this is not even a psychoactive, it's an isolate. It was just the CBD, which all it does is help the receptors receive the other cannabinoids better. It kind of helps amplify a receiver, if you will. It doesn't do anything for you psychoactively. And so I understand why a lot of people are kind of like, whoa, what are you doing? What is on any of this stuff or even talking about it? Like, it's just drugs are bad, we're good, and off you go. And I would challenge people for a moment. We've been doing this war on drugs now for 52 years, starting with President Nixon in the early 70s. I mean, you tell me who's winning. I mean, you tell me if we're better off. You tell me when we look at our incarceration rates over the last 50 years and how we have more people incarcerated in this country than anybody else in the world. One of the highest, if not the highest, depending on which Google search you believe, highest incarceration rate per capita of any country in the world, any country, is us. And who are the predominant people that are in that? And why are they there? When the majority of the people in there are people, when the ratios are not the same, when you look at population rates, we know people don't do quote unquote drugs based on race. It's not a racial disparity. It's not like it's one group and not the other. We like to believe that. I don't know who's paying for all the cocaine to come across the border. Somebody's buying it. Somebody's using it. And it's in this country. And it's not just people that are poor. It's not just minorities. It's not just people that can't keep their crap together. It's not just those people. Back to your mask. And that's why I think it's really, really important. Why I think this, in addition to just kind of like you wanting to know this, but I think it's important for us. It's a challenge. And I will tell you, it is uncomfortable and it sucks. And it makes me sick on a daily basis when I really have to pull back the mask I was wearing, looking at our country, looking at the legal system, thinking that people that had been elected for generations before, that I thought we were going down a different path. I thought we were doing things differently. I thought we had a bigger goal in mind than fear and being scared and control and isolation. But you look at the judicial system, the healthcare system, the political system, the way things are zoned, we have never reconciled these social issues that we have based on race and gender specifically. And you can add in sexuality at the end of that. I'm not asking you to agree with sexuality. I'm not asking you to do the rest of that stuff. And I'm lumping them in with the other two. When you can look across the numbers and the disparity amongst social groups, and I know people, there's a guy that I met, and I was in the middle of reading this book, and I was trying to like reconcile, like, no, in my mind, like if you do something wrong, you break the law, you go to jail, you go in front of a judge, like they just treat you based on you breaking the law. And he dealt synthetic marijuana in high school and for a couple of years after it. He told me, he said, I knew I went in front of a judge as a white guy because I knew I wasn't going to get as much as the other guys because I was banking on it. I knew that. Everybody knew that. Now that's one anecdotal story. You really start looking at the numbers. You really start looking at the data, science, not just the emotional side of it. All this, how this ties into it is it starts to crumble my wall and my sheen of what I thought drugs were. And it just kind of falls. Everything starts to fall down in front of me. The more I learn, the more I go out and research, the more conversations I have. I can remember reading that book by Michelle Alexander, and they talked about how law enforcement agencies, they confiscate drugs and all that money. It goes to their budget. It goes to their departmental budgets. And I'm driving around here in Fort Bend County, road I've been around my whole life, Fort Bend County Sheriff's cars I've seen my whole life, and I finally look at the back quarter panel of this Camaro, and it says on this sticker, paid for by drug dealers. That's what it says on it. I've seen that my whole life. And now I'm like, now my perspective has changed, and I see that differently. I'd seen it. It's like the FedEx arrow and the logo. I'd seen it, but I'd never saw it. But once I can see it, I can't unsee this disparity. So all these things are starting to happen, and then I start to research more, and I'm watching stuff on all these other big time, kind of what you call psychedelics. Again, this is a 5-year process for me, just to tell you. So it wasn't like I went out over a weekend and just decided to, chomp on some dried mushrooms and see what happens. I'm very methodical in that way. And it just goes and goes and goes. And there's books and there's podcasts and there's research. If you just research and really, really look at it. And this world of mine crumbled around this idea that the war on drugs was somehow to protect me or somehow as to protect you. Because like, if you're really that interested in protecting me and protecting you, then why isn't the speed limit 40 miles an hour? Then why isn't the actual medicinal benefits? They have them. That's what's got this big push to become legal. It wasn't because some people wanted to get high. It's because people were starting to see significant changes, medical issues, epilepsy, things like that. Some of these because go back and look, that was the big impetus around it. These moms and dads were like, this actually helps because it is a medicine. And starting to look at plants as la medicina, the medicine versus this evil thing. And how, what's wrong with cocaine? Well, cocaine, they isolate. I mean, people in Peru for years, for decades, for centuries probably, have been chewing on coca leaves, and it's a stimulant. But when you like isolate it, chop it up as a powder and snort it, 100 times of it up your nose, it's like grain alcohol, meaning 100 proof versus 40. You're shoving this stuff, but it's about the usage of it. It's about the way it's intended. It's about understanding it. And this requires you to then understand not our world, this material world that we live in, but the natural world that we ignore and we try to get away from. This goes in the indigenous side of things. This goes and looks at how people have lived on this planet outside of our civilization and our culture. Part of Graham Hancock's work and a lot of other people saying, hey, instead of looking backwards in terms like from a progress standpoint, but like how the divine, how does God want from us to be involved in the world? We may not be of this world and we may be going somewhere else when we're done. But while we're here, it's not here to be exploited or to be ignored. God is in these things. God is in nature. God isn't just where it's clean. God isn't just where it's nice or where it's popular, or where it's successful. So for part of this too, I want to be very clear, it isn't just, let's thought I'd try some mushrooms and go to a concert. No, this was very personal to me. This was very in-depth. This was seeking of knowledge and understanding. It goes beyond just feeling good for a couple hours. I wanted to understand. I really, really did. Mushrooms and fungi, mycology. I started getting into that and reading about it. Documentary called Fantastic Fungi, which I would encourage you to watch if you're interested in this kind of thing. Because what it did is it showed the role of that particular part of our ecosystem. Not a plant, and it's not an animal. It's actually more like an animal than a plant, but its role in nature. And it revealed for me one of the issues we have, I think, as a culture, which is we don't know how to accept death at all. We are scared of it, terrified of it. We don't like things that are dirty. We don't like polarization, this dualism around black and white, clean, dirty. And it's the part of the end of the cycle, the system, this cyclical flywheel, this ecological flywheel that God has put into motion. It serves its purpose in nature by taking something that has done its time, whether it's a living like a mouse or you or me or a tree. And when it's done and it helps break it down, put it back into the earth so that it can be used again. That's the basic nature of all mycology, by the way. And so for part of that, and I'm watching this show about just the kind of the science of it. And then they start talking about spiritual part of it. There was some of them, the psychedelic parts, the mushrooms that have psychedelic features and contain psilocybin specifically as a chemical. If you take enough of them, it's not just feeling good. There's revelation. There's understanding. There's perspective that is drawn. There's clarity. So I'm in my head just going, are you serious? I'm talking to my wife like, I'm thinking about, kind of want to know. I want to understand. And I'm looking for kind of that last thing to kind of push me over to kind of think about doing it. I'm still, even though understanding the differences and understanding, the science and all these things, I still wasn't somebody who was like looking. I stopped drinking 4 years ago, not because I have a problem with it, but because I just can't stand anything about it. I just can't stand it anymore for all it's done, all the bad. If you have a good time with it, it's your thing. I won't encourage people not to, but in my world, it's just something I don't have any time for, no love for anymore at all. There's a book that's come out, and anybody who's familiar with this is going to this is where they're going to sigh and think. It's going to be like, well, I'm glad it wasn't the reason you did it. But Michael Pollan has a book called How to Change Your Mind. And this is a big part of it. There's also a documentary series on Netflix about it. Part of the difficulty with this is changing our mind and realizing the perspectives we may have had before were wrong. And that is a hard thing for us to do, especially if we think that we're right. Especially if we come from a culture that doesn't have any room for second place. It doesn't have any room for being wrong. We have so much pride and ego in this country in terms of every decision we've made. We can't stand to stand up and say that we've done something wrong. It is not in our DNA. It is not. We don't have any room for that. Challenge people, we start talking about race and social issues. I'm like, well, tell me when. I think this is part of it for me. When did we say we were sorry or even recognize what we did to Native Americans, indigenous people that we massacred, wiped off the face of this continent? We did that. And I'm saying we, because I get to go back to school for free because I served in the military that did that. I have my house because I served in the military that did that, because I'm a citizen of the country that did that. I'm not pushing aside my responsibility or my role in it. I'm knee deep in it. We did that. We owned slaves. Like we did. And we act like all you got to do is just work hard to get yourself out of this hole. It's not that easy. It is not that simple. When did we stand up and say, hey, our bad. We had this whole thing screwed up and let's change it. Let's do something better. When did we ever recognize those things? I understand the difficulty in changing somebody's mind and really understanding that. I think that's why it's one of the biggest tenets that we're pushed on in repentance and recognition and restorative justice instead of retributive justice. We are a revenge-based society. We are an eye for an eye. That's what we want. After 9/11? No. We want something leveled. I want my pound of flesh.
Toby Keith is really good at that. The whole song.
Listen to the song.
I listened to
You
it
lit up
recently.
your world like the 4th of July. We'll put a boot in your ass. It's the
It's
American way.
Yeah. First off, thanks for all that, by the way. I want to acknowledge that. After sitting with Zeba and Uzma, the momming while Muslim ladies, those two amazing ladies that both of us have had an opportunity to sit with, I listened to that Toby Keith song in a whole new light.
Yeah.
I can't even get through it, actually. I'm like, oh, this is so good. And then when it gets to that part, I'm like, okay, can't now. All right. So help me with this. You go to a place. Is it a certain place? And then maybe talk about that. Like why the place, and then what happened in that time when you're actually like taking them.
So Michael Pollan has a book on how to change your mind. I read that. In it, there's a part where there's these group of terminal cancer patients that are having massive therapies, massive anxiety, like crippling anxiety about dying. And they go and they do this trial at Johns Hopkins University, which is leading the current research usage of magic mushrooms. By the way, Johns Hopkins, this is no small organization, and they're not insignificant at all. I read this in the book. They get done at like 90% of them, if I remember correctly, a massive amount of them had flipped their entire perspective on death. And I kept thinking, what in the world about that experience? What could you experience in a couple of hours from eating some dried mushrooms that would make you accept death and to feel loved? And also the other part about it was they were also completely okay with never doing it again. I don't have to do it again. And there's people that you start researching like, yeah, it was one of the most significant things I've ever done in my life. I don't have to do it anymore every Friday. There's also a part of it which, back to like the indigenous side, is understanding that it is a process. There's a workup. It is work. It is an experience. It is before, during, and after. You have to do something with it. There's things to be done. Journaling, talking, meditation, consternation, all these things that are around what you're doing beforehand. And so a friend of mine who's in a lot of ayahuasca trips, former Force Recon Marine, had a massive meltdown. This was his big part back to the military, by the way. One of the reasons that entheogens are coming, one of the reasons that Colorado, Oregon have legalized it for therapeutic uses is because it's helping veterans with massive PTSD who there's nothing left and they're finding out that it's actually having impact on them. That's one of the big impetuses for this change. The guys are going from, and gals are going from drinking and dying and wanting to kill themselves to becoming functional people, to becoming whole people again, in a sense, relatively speaking. Recently, this buddy is Force Recon, done a bunch of ayahuasca trips, a bunch of peyote, mescaline, all the rest of the stuff. And so he puts us on this course with another friend of mine that wanted to do it. Setting becomes a big part of it too. That's the other thing. Your intent has to be right, I would say. You have to know what you're doing. There has to be intent, what you're doing. You have to be focused on what you're doing. And so we got an Airbnb out here in Central Texas. Now here's the thing. Here's the hardest part is it's still illegal. Even though it's growing out of cow dung all over the state of Texas right now, behind my house even, to be honest with you. I can find it the next hour if I really, really wanted to, just outside my house. Even though it's growing out of the ground, it's just a gift from the divine. I think it's illegal to have and use in that way. Back to the war on drugs. Illegal is a subtle perspective in terms of how it goes. It's a process. It's ritualistic. If you do it, I think right, I think it should be done. There's a time before you meet with people that have done it, and they talk to you about it, and they talk to you about what to expect. Because really, there's the angst, there's the anxiety. And the day of, like when I left with my buddy, the anxiety was overwhelming. Like it was just, what am I doing? This is crazy. Oh my gosh, I had no idea what to expect. You have no idea what to expect, especially after you read so many things about what it does. Meeting God, talking to people that are dead, your ego dying, all the rest of these things. These are not small things. We go out to this place here in Central Texas through one of those places where you can get with water, trees, nature, isolated. You want to be in amongst what I consider the divine's playground, God's playground. First night we had dinner. The next day we do it, pair, if you will, goes into the evening. And it's one of the things I wrote in my journal beforehand was my biggest fear was I was going to get done with it at the end of the day and nothing would change, that like everything would be the same. That was my big fear. And my big fear came true the next morning. Mortgage was still due. Life kept going. The world was still the same. The world had not changed at all, but I had, to be honest. I mean, my perspective had changed. My clarification had changed. Do you remember the old 3D posters where you look at them and look at them, and then they would just kind of pop?
You stare at it long enough and it jumps out at you. Yeah, I remember this.
So imagine that with just the world you see every day. Trees and shadows and light. And all of a sudden, now things are appearing. The irony of what I'm about to tell you is none of it is enough to accurately describe what it is. How I can begin to try to get you to understand what it's like at that level, and there are different levels. If you've ever thought of like, what would it be like in the presence of God? What would it be like to be music? What would it be like to be light? Be cool with something like resonate, to feel as if you are that tree you're touching, and you can see things in its sacred geometry, which is something you can read about, that as you look at things and these symbols appear, almost like they're revealing themselves, but it's still the same tree that's there. But now that tree looks totally different. And I should say that a little bit with some hesitation, because the tree is still the tree, and you are completely sober and you are completely aware. It's not like when you have too much alcohol and you can't remember, or things get a little, even though that never happened to me, when things get foggy and you can't really, it's that whole, no, when you are in this, in my experience, and talk to anybody who hasn't said anything different, you are are completely aware. You are sober-minded, if you will. It is not an altered, like motor skills or physiology. It's an altered state of consciousness, but your physiology is not altered. So you're seeing things. I can remember when it started coming through my hands, and it was like energy that's flowing from my forearms and out of my fingertips. And I started to look around, and shadows started to change, and started to take on different shapes and started to move. I could see things, but I could still see them for what they were. So they call them hallucinogens or hallucinations. I don't like that at all, because that's not what it does. It doesn't mask something. It reveals, back to your series, it reveals what it is that you're looking at all along. There's an energy. The Aramaic word for Christ is masiha, the breath of life. What is, it's the spirit. It is this energy. It is how did God start the entire thing? Breathing life into the ground. There's a breath in you. There's a breath in me. There's an energy. What is that? Frequency, quantum physics, quantum mechanics. What is it about all this stuff? Frequencies, math, resonation. What is all this stuff going on? And what is it? That tree is alive. There's a life force in that. There's a life force in you. There's a life force in all of these things. If God's in it, then it's all divine. And so when you're able to see that in a way, or feel it, or become more in tune with it, because you already know, here's the irony too. I'll tell people all day long, you don't have to do psychedelics. You don't have to. We talk about what this means when you resonate, when you are in communion or community with people. Johann Hari wrote a book called Chasing the Scream. His big takeaway as an addict around that drugs and the rest of the stuff was that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. Opposite of addiction is community, is connection. And you talk about this. Mycelium, fungi, the entire system is to connect. They connect trees, they share resources, they communicate. There's an intelligence there. And not just like a survival mentality, but a beneficial. There's something there. And this is a product of that. And so by just taking a couple of mushrooms out of the ground and popping, you can literally commune with the divine. And I want to say that some hesitation. Resonance is the other way, or communing with the divine. Like you, all of a sudden, the clarity and it is overwhelming awe. I just read a book by Dr. Keltner, that's his name, called The New Science of Awe. If you've ever been in awe of something, when your daughter was born, there's times your wife has looked at you, there's times that you've seen a sunset, there's times that you've seen something up where your neck of the woods, just the beauty of the mountains and the green and that awe, that feeling, that bliss that you get. That is what it is on an amplified scale of just, I can't explain it to you. That when you hear music, you are the music. It is you and you are it, and it resonates. But it's also very, very whimsical. This is where it's going to get a little bit interesting. One of the things I was told about was to look for the coyotes and what the coyotes are about. And if you look at mythology and we tend to look at people like Loki, Mercury, and some of these other gods of mischief, evil, or even like the Hasatan or the adversary, the devil's advocate kind of thing. And we like to make them good and evil, versus the Sioux had a position in their tribe called the Hayoka. And the Hayoka, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I think I am, goes the opposite, if you will, of the community. At a wedding, they're crying. At a funeral, they're laughing. When it's cold out, they wear hot clothes and vice versa. They're trying to create the other argument. People, I don't like to be the devil's advocate. It's not to be the devil's advocate for the sake of it. It's to remind us of the other sides of the story. It's to remind us to not become so concrete and so black and white on things. It's not that simple. And so the Hayoka would do that, really the way that the Norse mythology and the rest of this stuff was written in terms of the perspective and the ideation they're trying to tell you, to counter this kind of like one-sided, here's the exact thing about these coyotes. And here's the other thing, the mushrooms are not, they're there to teach you, they're there to reveal to you, but they are not there to serve you. For me, it got interesting. They're not there to do your bidding. You're not there, hey, this is what I want, give me all these things. Okay, sure, what else do you want? Thank you, kind sir, I'm out the door. And they'll mess with you and teach you that. They'll humble you. Ego death comes at a price, and it comes hard and fast. I'd had this playlist set up, vision in my mind was going to happen, put on my little blindfold and dive into it internally and do all this other stuff. I had my phone and I had my noise canceling Sony ones that I've had for a long time I fly with. They've never not worked. I get my phone, this phone I'm showing you. I pull the playlist up, the headphones are on, I press play, I set my phone down, and I'm going to dive into this, like just the abyss of wonderfulness, and the music starts and it stops. And I start it again, put it back down and it stops. And now I don't get mad at people. I get mad at things that don't work. Like if like connectivity, electronics, mechanical stuff, like that's what pisses me off. People, I understand people, but mechanical things, if they're designed, they should work. And I'm getting mad. The little engine's going like, son of, now of all the times for this stupid thing to not work, this is the worst time. I don't want to bother the people. I want to be in my own little world. What are you doing to me? What is going on? And I'm starting to get mad, and I'm hitting play and I pick up my phone. I'm looking at it, smashing the play button, and I'm looking at this phone, right? Play. As soon as I hit play, pause, play, pause, play, pause, play, pause, play, pause. And I keep doing it. And then I remembered my friend's wife had told me about the coyotes. I won't say that I audibly heard it, but I sensed laughter, giggling, kind of like, are you going to be a big boy yet? Or are you going to sit there and cry about a, pair of headphones that don't work? Listening, or are you not? That was the message I got. And I was like, okay. And I had this moment of like, yes. And the tension came down. I was like, yeah, I was being an a-hole. I was being a little kid. I was being a little brat because it wasn't playing right. And I listened and I pressed play and I set the phone down. Not only did it keep playing by 9 or 10 o'clock at night, next morning after we woken up and I was going to gather all my things and I'd grabbed the headphones that were laying over by the bed because I'd taken them off, some other stuff. I put the headphones back on just to check them and they were still playing. The music was still playing. And this is 12, 14 hours at least later and they're still playing. So I'm like, well, okay. And that was I think God winks at us. I think divine talks to us all kinds of ways. Now look, is that completely random? Maybe it is. I just know that when I was in electronics in the Navy, we used to say that PFM is why all that stuff would work. And we'd press the I believe button. And PFM is pure effing magic in terms of how electronics works and the rest of the stuff works. And it's like, there's some mystery to some of this stuff. There's some things that we just, all of us, I think, if we really want to be honest, have experienced that just don't make any sense. On your podcast is at the peak of that. It's like, surely this is all nonsense. This isn't real. That didn't happen that way. It's easy to dismiss these experiences, especially if they're anecdotal. And that's my anecdotal experience. And even more interesting than that, to add to that story was so I was on a Sunday, went home, Monday had a conference call, used those headphones. It's like 5 minutes before the thing. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't charge them. They were playing for 12, 14 hours. They're going to be dead. So I put them on just to try, press play, pops on. And the little voice says, headphones at 80%, 80%. I've had those headphones for years. There's no way in the world those headphones playing that long or that often without being charged again should have ever been at 80%, let alone it should have been dead, and it wasn't. So what does that mean? And I think this is I think we're given opportunities to understand. God gives us the choice to take, and we can dismiss it. You can go do a bunch of mushrooms tomorrow and then come back and go, yeah, and just chalk it up to whatever. Be like, oh, yeah, it was kind of weird and some visuals and thought some weird things and saw some things that don't really make sense, but you know what? Whatever, and move on. I don't believe God is in the business of forcing us to understand. I just don't see that yet. I think God is the ultimate part of love is you have to have a choice. If there's no choice, it's not love. First and second commandment, in terms of the greatest commandments. The first one we kind of dismiss. We go, oh, of course we love God. I mean, there should be a choice. There should be some difficulty there. There should be something besides just, because God's powerful and amazing and everything that's good is because of God. Nothing else is. I think we get ourselves into a corner, especially in this country, around that particular mindset, saying that God has to be good for us to love God. Wife, daughter, people that are close to you. If everything they ever said, did, or were to you was always, never got on your nerves, never making you upset, was always the best thing, always wonderful, of course you'd love them. What's not to love? What's not to love about that? What I want to know is difficult. What about when it's hard? How do we explain these things? What do we do with all that? What do we do with the other sides? What do we do with those other things that are difficult? And so part of this experience around, and all this, by the way, is what that experience is about. All this understanding and revelation in my experience is what that was about and was part of that experience as well. I did resonate and come in contact with people that had passed away. I saw things and experienced things. I didn't do anything, but just experiences internal. Now, at the same time, the external world just becomes, and it's love and grace and gratitude. And I remember sitting there at one point, but I knew why in Luke, Jesus didn't argue with the soldiers when they came to get him, kill him. And back to retribution and the way that we do things in society, Jesus was going to be killed. And it's one of the things I still can't. And he didn't fight back. He actually accosted Peter for doing so and healed the very soldier that came to take him away to kill him. And I felt like at one point, I understood that more than I did anything else. The ridiculous nature that we're fighting over these baubles and beads that we do, over these shiny things. Ecclesiastes all over again. Trinkets. Listen to Mike Tyson talk. You want to do a sports reference? This is a guy who is as famous as anybody's ever been in the history of sports. And he'll tell you it's all garbage. Talk to Michael Phelps. Speaking of mental health and therapy, I listened to him. I got to meet him and hear him talk for an hour. Single greatest athletic performance in the history of mankind that I could even think of. 8 gold medals in Beijing in 2008. A couple years later, he wants to kill himself because he thinks his life is worthless. That's what I mean by we know these things. Imagine that level of success and you still aren't happy. I'll even pick on my New York Yankee fans. Yankee Nation. How many World Series championships? It's never enough. We already know these things. The answers are in front of us if we would look. So I would say that part of what they did was help me look and see those things as far as those perspectives and clarity on them.
Wow.
So hopefully that answers your question.
It does on so many levels. I feel like that we've been lied to most of our life. You have been a great catalyst for that for me. Look beyond, almost like a magic show. Do you realize what's going over here? You're so focused on the act, you're not seeing the misdirection, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think you're great at that. I just wonder about this. If somebody right now is listening and they're like, okay, Sean sounds really intelligent, sounds like he really researched this out, would you recommend they try in the right context, in the right setting, in the right spot? We're not going to traipse around Gold Hill, our area, the rural areas of Oregon, look for the next mushroom and like, let's try this. Let's see if that works and gets me where I need to go. My concern about doing it, and this goes to my mother-in-law, is she has always said that things like this open a doorway to demonic presence. How would you respond to that?
Well, things that we don't understand can seem demonic. Things that we fear. I mean, if I say, what does the devil look like? When we have these new series now, we're a super hot guy. But
well, I know what the devil looks like. He just retired last year from college basketball. Oh, sorry.
Right, exactly. I mean, you could say that, oh my God, people would listen to this and go, oh my gosh, he's lost his way, done some weird plant, and now he's talking about being Unitarian and Universalist and or some sort of big gods and everything. And no, it's not. There's clear lines and there's good guys and bad guys, and you're out of your mind. Here's the thing, in lieu of all that, whatever makes you comfortable in some sense, I would never want to challenge it for the sake of it as some sort of author, to me, then you're doing the same thing to other people. Now you're like, no, Neil, you need to go do mushrooms so that you have an understanding of life, and your mother-in-law needs to do them so she can get off her high horse. That would be ridiculous. I think if you understand what's really going on here, here's the thing. I would never tell anybody to do it. And I mean, that's one of the big takeaways I had. I would never tell anybody that they would do it, but I also vowed that if anybody wanted to, that I would guide them. And I have since then guided people, and I'm going to have people that I'm going to guide in the future on my own completely. When I become a therapist, I plan on providing, using the cutting edge technology, AI, VR, whatever else needs to help people therapeutically. I will use traditional therapy models as well. And I also want to understand and pursue the use of psychedelics and entheogens to do that as well. I would never tell you that you have to. Anybody that tells you that you have to, or even if they say you should, I would sincerely pull back from that. I had a calling that was internal, and I do believe on this part. It has to come from you. You have to make that decision. Do not let anybody else, that seems really cool, or that guy seems really this, or she seems super, what she said. Because there are some things about it. It's not completely perfect. It is not one size fits all. Now, there's not to this date been anybody who's died taking entheogens, like from it. Can you be off your rocker and jump off a cliff and die? You sure can, which is why back to set and setting, it is super important, especially if you do a higher dose. You need to have somebody around you to guide you. That is 100%. I don't care if you don't take anything else away from this. If you ever do something like that, you have somebody who understands it with you. More than anything, do not do. I talked to one guy. I tried to start a mushroom club, mycology group here in Houston, like literally about mycology. This guy showed up, and he's walking the whole country. Nothing's wrong with that. He's just a self-described hobo, if you will. Started talking about this, and he started telling me all the stuff he had been doing. Everything that everybody tells you shouldn't do, he did. Like doing it by himself, doing it multiple times in a row. I don't even know if I will ever do it again, as much as it was profound. One of the top profound moments, if not the most profound experience I've ever had. I can't tell you for sure I'll do it again. I might not. I don't need to. Thinking I probably will because of some other things, especially around the therapy side, because I want to be able to speak to that and these others. If for no other reason than that. But on a personal level, I need to explore, it did its purpose, if you will. But anybody that tells you that you should, I think they're just full of it. And I think the demonic side, the worry about, this goes back to the messaging we were given. Oh, this is bad. This is bad. Go back and look at what was driving Nixon and everybody else in the early 70s, the 60s. Women were voting. Minorities were given equal rights. You had the Vietnam War. There was a complete and total travesty. Any kind of thing about justice or righteousness. And going back to Johann Hari's book, I'll give this as an example to kind of help maybe subjugate the fear a little bit. Go back and look. There was like a 40 to, I want to say 50% drug addiction rate in the United States Army and the United States military in Vietnam. At the end of Vietnam, one of the things they were most worried about socially, we were worried about this, all these drug addicts coming back to the U.S. Here are these combat vets and whatever, former military, mostly guys. They're all going to be drug addicts and come back, and it's going to turn our society into a maelstrom. Johann Hari has a part of his book where he talks about Rat Park. And you always see these examples, and they'll show a rat in a cage, and if he's given cocaine in a liquid, he or she will drink it and just die, just like become addicted and just do nothing but that, and just see it's addictive and it'll kill you. You can OD on it. They leave out, there's another part of that experiment that you can do and that people have done that helped shed some light on this fear about, if you touch it, you're going to get drunk. You're going to never want to not be drunk. And back to his argument around the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's community. Rat Park was given this beautiful park for the rats. They can go have sex and hang out. And it's decorated, places to play, places to run, places to sleep, places to eat. They have all that they need. And they put the same bottle of drugs in there, and they don't have any addiction problems. They take the rats out of those cages and they swap the rats, and their behavior changes. They do it again and again and again, and the rats that are in the rat park, people, community, the things that they need, sustenance, don't become addicts. The ones that all they have is cocaine, all they have is whatever that drug is, that's all they do. And so I was reading this in the book, and he goes, by the way, we've had a real life experiment of this, and we can show that this works this way for real. And it was the Vietnam War, and I'd never seen this before. People came back, and I know this from my time in. When you're in, talk to veterans that are in Iraq and Afghanistan or anywhere else, any other veteran, when you're in that world, you do things differently. When you come out of that world, you can go back being a civilian. You can go back to not having to worry about that level of stress, that level of what you're being asked to do at that point. This group of military men and women came back to the United States, and we did not have the problems that we thought we did. Drug addiction rate, those kinds of things became super small, proving that point, proving the idea of community is what is powerful and connection. And that's part of the mushrooms story. That is part of this kind of thing. I would argue that what's demonic is separation. What is demonic is isolation. What is demonic is not welcoming the other to the group. That is what creates separation. And that's what creates that thing that we're trying to avoid in terms of, it becomes this morality thing. It's not a morality issue. It doesn't mean that person that has it in your community you're going to like. This is the part we got to get over. I like it when I'm around people that I care about, and like, but not everybody I like. So how do you live with that though? How do you live with everybody?
To your point, I don't think that really fits into the divine. I don't see Jesus just hanging out with everybody that agreed with him.
I recall a few stories that he didn't. Matter of fact, that tended to be his MO.
He kind of sought after the people that he was like, you're not like me. Come hang out with me.
The revelation around that. And I've been very fortunate to travel. I've been very fortunate to travel lots of places and to truly meet people from like different cultures and perspectives. I remember I was at Schlumberger, I was in Canada at dinner, excited and bragging about the death penalty in Texas and how we do things down here and all this crap. It really hurts to go back and look at that, by the way. It hurts to look back and think that I argued this way, especially with the way that I feel about that stuff now. And this guy, the guy that I was doing business with, just said, I just don't think we should kill people. I just don't think there should be a death penalty. And there was this moment where I was getting ready to kind of argue back, and I just thought, why can't he just feel that way? He just likes UNC. So I understand idolatry and the rest of this crap. I was saying, like, why can't you? You like the color blue. You like Nikes. You like Oregon more than you like Washington. Oregon more than you like any other state. Or you like North Carolina more than you like any other. Like, why can't you have that? I had this part of me was like, no, I got to like convince this guy that he's wrong. It should be okay. This is how justice is done. And then I'm like, man, it was just like this little moment of introspection. If we stop trying to convince and become everybody else's moral police and everybody else's ethical police, work on ourselves. This is what I mean by this is not revelatory. This is not something you haven't already heard. And these things that come in these experiences when you're in psychedelics push you to just really, really understand that. It's not enough, but it pushes you to really, 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 really like feel it, be that, and know that, man, you can try, you can shoehorn it. First chance they get, they'll go the other route. They'll go behavior, commitment, respect, the rest of this stuff. It's like mafia bosses. It's like Saddam Hussein in Iraq. As much as that was a terrible idea to go and do that, as soon as he took the lid off, everybody else was like, they didn't like the guy. They feared him. And you can do that. And like, that's a tough thing to handle. What do we do about that?
What I've always respected about you is the idea, again, of why do we always think that way? Why have you always believed that? Why have you always understood that? Listen, I think this series, as much as I want to admit fully, like when I walked into it, I thought, I don't know what this is going to bring. There has been so many great guests that have really pushed against what I have always believed and what I've always thought about. And to me, listen, it's not my job to convince you. I'll share, sure. Try to say, hey, this is why you should. If you choose not to, listen, that's okay too. I think is what you're saying.
It's your journey in that sense. And you have to give, this goes into grace. This goes into that type of approach with people and what it means to love somebody regardless. You just have to go, okay, well, I mean, even if you're like, look, that sounds great, Sean, but I still think you're a dumb for doing that. I'd be okay.
Yeah, full disclosure. Absolutely, I did. Then at the same time, I thought, what I know about you virtually, what I know about you just in our conversations is you don't walk into anything half-hearted. You don't walk into anything without doing the research, without doing the background, with 87-step exit plan, I feel like.
Yeah.
That's just what the vibe I get from you. Aaron Rodgers was out in our neck of the woods. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers, the football player Aaron Rodgers, who's recently now a Jet. I can actually say that and not laugh too much, I think. He was in this dark room, in this dark place, I think for like 72 hours or something crazy like that. And people mocked him repeatedly. And I thought to myself, first off, that sounds scary to me. Like being in a room underground for 72 hours does not sound fun to me. But people mocked and ridiculed him. And I thought to myself, what if that's the only place Aaron can go to really get clarity? And we mock that and we ridicule that and we poo-poo that. And we're like, what a dummy, what a hippie. I mean, he did go to Berkeley, so maybe all those do fit. Why is it that we had this stigma around it in your mind?
The stigma comes because it helps create or helps sustain the facade. I don't have to do the work. It's almost like you get to run on the surface. You want to talk about like a superficial thing. There it is. I mean, we're sports that were originally designed to be leisure activities for you and I to be a part of. Like we were supposed to play these things, have now become these bastions of not only economic and social power and influence, but they become this mega distraction from life. And we sit around and don't understand why our lives aren't fulfilled and why these things, and we just go to work and we just do our thing. And we just, back to your point, we don't see what's really going on. And I don't want to act like there's some sort of like conspiracy theory, but there is in a sense, it's by design. And it's been this design for a long time for a lot of people. Throughout history, by the way, go back millennia. It's the Colosseum. It's the Circus Maximus. It's the shiny object. If I can distract you long enough away from what's really important, for some material gain, which is really what it's about at the end of the day. It's just economics and power. And I think the fear that they were worried about, you go back to somebody like Ram Dass, with Richard Alpert, Timothy Leary, who Nixon said were the most dangerous men in America in the 70s, because they were saying, if you go do this, it could open your mind to where you don't want to go volunteer for the military. You don't want to work in a factory your whole life. You don't want to be a cog in this wheel, this economic wheel, social wheel, political wheel. It needs you. It needs your sacrifice for it to sustain itself. And they got scared to death because they understood, all due respect to President Nixon, whatever that is, but he was a fraud. He was a crook. He was a cheat. He knew it.
Well, and I think my generation doesn't remember him because he was long before us. And then we're like, am I reading accurate stuff? Am I reading not accurate?
Look at Watergate's. There's a lot of history about Watergate, man.
Oh, I'm sure there is. Yeah. So, Sean, if someone's hearing you right now and they want to know more, about the journey, I don't want to say it's a trip because that almost sounds disrespectful. The experience that you went through, they want to know more. What's the best way someone can reach out to you?
If you're okay with it, I would ask them. If you're really compelled and you really just wanted some personal lecture or just some extended conversation, have them reach out to you and forward it to me.
So if you guys want to get connected with Sean, I will be the vehicle to have that happen.
And I made a promise to the powers that be, if you will, in earnest, reply to any request like that at all.
Well, let's do some silliness. We don't have enough of that in our life, so let's add to that. Silliness, senseless. Here it is. Number 2. It's a blue. It's a blue 2. 2 things. This is perfect. This is right up your alley, I feel like. It's almost like it knew what we were supposed to ask you. It's weird how that works sometimes. Number 2 is this. 2 things you hope to finish this year.
Oh, well, definitely all my classes that line up for the remainder of this calendar year. And I would say, what else is on the list this year? Well, I want to read all the books I want to read. There's probably about 6. It's hard right now with all my regular stuff, but I'm fitting it in. There's about 6 or 7 books I want to read. I'll read those books and finish my classes this year. If I'm going to be selfish, it's all about me.
Not work on the pickleball game?
Yeah, I do that. I didn't even think about that as a choice. It's a requirement. That's part of my sanity.
Have you finished UFO God yet? That's my question.
I have not finished that one yet. So, I'm, like I told you, I was half the same part you were.
I finished.
And it's
good. We got to talk about that someday. So there's some great books to check out. Well, Sean, I want to say thanks again, man. I really appreciate you doing this. I know we talk a lot, but it's fun to finally put it on tape, as they say back in the day. But I just want to say thanks so much for the time you gave us. All right, guys and gals, kids and campers alike, that is it. That is all. That is our show today. So here's my question as we get out of here for you to consider, ponder, think it over. But as you digest that, as you think that over, what the heck is coming to mind? Was Nancy Reagan right back in 1987? Just say no. Just say no to drugs. That's how long that's been around, by the way. I looked it up. 1987 was when she kind of coined that phrase. Ironically, in a Oakland elementary school. Yeah, started the DARE program. Everybody has a DARE kid, right? You had your DARE t-shirt. Now listen, I'm not pro-drug. I'm not anti-drug. I don't know really what I am in this moment, except to say I have a really good friend that had an experience. Now, is it one you should take? Is it a journey and an avenue and a street you should walk down? That's the best part about this show. That's up for you to decide. But I am curious how you think and what you think about what Sean shared today. Is it demonic? Is it wrong? What is it? Does it fall in line with what we're talking about, this mask idea? Have you been hidden from this idea? Points to ponder perhaps this week. Let me know. You can, of course, let me know at opspodcast.com is a great place to let me know. You can let us know on the socials at OPS Podcast Show. A little different than the website, but still gets to the same spot, which is to me. And don't forget this as we get out of here. Do not forget. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned till next week when we walk in other people's shoes.